Welcome back to another Office Hours podcast with Professor Brad Perkins. Here again, we have an in-studio guest, right? Chuck Cutler, attorney. Chuck, could you go ahead and introduce yourself a little bit, kind of your background and what it is you do for a living?
I'm an attorney. I handle civil litigation cases, and over the years, I've handled a number of cases involving construction accidents and construction disputes and buildings that have problems after they're completed. That's how you and I met.
Yes, that's how you and I met. Thing one, Chuck has a son that is an alumni of the construction. Two. Two. Oh, that's right. Yes, because I used to confuse your sons.
Scott and Peter.
Scott and Peter. I used to call. Gosh, which one was it? I think I called Scott his brother's name.
Peter.
Yeah. Or anyway, I confused the two of them. All right. It's a small construction engineering world, right? We're going to talk about that in a second with regards to the case that we had. But so that's how we were introduced. I did some expert witness for your firm, and it just ended up being we ended up knowing everybody, and I do mean everybody that was involved in that case. Yes. But anyway, we appreciate having another actual attorney here because, like always, the disclaimer is that if you need real legal advice, don't get it from a podcast. Definitely don't get it from an engineer. All right, I'll give you lots of good references. I know some of the good attorneys, and I know which ones to avoid in the Des Moines area. All right, there are both. With that in mind, thank you, Chuck, for attending. Okay, another in-studio guest that we have back with us again is Sophia. Sophia, if you would, please.
Yes. Hello, I'm Sophia. I am back, and this is my fourth episode, I think. I'm a junior in construction engineering, and happy to be here.
All right, and I definitely appreciate that. And for anyone else that would like to make the journey here and be here in person, love to have you in the podcast room with us. Right, next week especially, since it's week before class starts. I would love to have you in the room. It's just easier. It's just easier to discuss. Okay. All right. There are several people that are dialed in. I'm not going to go through an interview or allow everybody to introduce because people drop in and drop out. But definitely, if you're on the Zoom call and you would like to discuss or ask a question, please make sure that you tune in, wave your hand or something so I can see you on the Zoom that you want to participate, and we would love to have you participate. I strongly suggest that you do. All right. With that being said, let's get started. Okay, Chuck, if you go over kind of your background and maybe we could talk about the one case that I worked for you, and then maybe some of the other ones that are interesting to our students with regards to construction, litigation, a little bit of everything. It's always great for them to hear from a real attorney.
I'll be happy to. So the case we worked on involved a situation where an old building was renovated into a number of apartments, and the HVAC system didn't perform the way the owner expected and the owner wanted. And the first thing we had to do, and Brad and I were working for the general contractor. And what we had to do is try to figure out, first of all, whether there was a problem, and secondly, the nature of the problem. In other words, why was it not working correctly?
Well, and this is something I think that you get more into when you're renovating older buildings.
Oh, for sure.
And this is for anybody in construction or going into construction or design work when you're designing the systems for an older building. So they had this building that was on the historic registry.
Correct.
Right? And that just adds extra problems. Sophia's father specializes in historic renovations, and you get into this building and they're like, all right, we want it to be preserved, all the historic stuff, but yet I'm an owner and I've got expectations that it's going to perform like a modern building. Oh, and I have a budget too, so I don't have infinite resources to fix things.
That particular case is really a good case example for lots of things that can go wrong on these projects and the reasons why they go wrong.
Yes.
If you think about the first steps, I mean, I've been involved in cases where I think the building is functioning perfectly well. I mean, it's functioning the way it was designed and there's no problem with it. Been involved in other cases, a number of cases where it's not perfect. Construction almost never goes perfect in a big project, and there's always things that there's some give and take on, and by the time they get to me, the lawyer, usually there is something not working the way the owner hoped. And then the next step of that in our process is figuring out what went wrong and why it went wrong and
Whose fault it is. Yeah,
Right.
there.
And
And that's a tough one.
it's very hard, and sometimes it's design, and sometimes it's budget, and sometimes it can be a miscalculation that somebody makes. But this particular one that we're talking about had a little bit of everything in it as far
Well,
as the reasons why it didn't work.
It had a little bit of everything, but you know the thing that frustrate. All right, I'm sorry. That case did frustrate me a little bit because as an engineer, this design stuff like this, I'm looking at it going, you know, for what you had to work with, I'm not sure how it could have been better. You know, So we've got this historic building turned into apartments. It was not meant to be apartments from the beginning.
Correct.
What was it originally? I forgot.
It might have been a theater,
Part of it was but
because they put a whole new level
yeah.
floor.
So we're taking an old building and drastically altering what it was originally designed for. When you do this, now we have to bring up the old building according to current code. For those of you that go to classes in town engineering and black engineering, this is why neither of those two buildings have gotten a really good renovation. Is that the challenge there is that you start messing with it and now you've got to bring it up to current code.
That's correct.
And now we just opened a can of worms. All right. Which of you students here? This is probably one of the mechanical engineers' chance to chime in. Who goes to class regularly in black engineering? Come on, I know we got several mechanic. Kaylee.
Yeah.
Kaylee does. All right, Kaylee's a regular at black engineering, right? Awesome building.
I wouldn't use the word awesome.
Wouldn't
but
use the word
decent.
awesome. Decent. All right. Well, the real question is, which is worse, town engineering or black engineering?
I think black is, in the sense, like, literally every hallway looks the exact same. It's so easy to get
And
lost
a
in that.
dungeon. It looks like a dungeon.
Yeah.
Right?
In the basement. Yeah.
Oh, well, they don't even have to go to the basement. You can just walk through the first floor of black engineering, right? Usually, black engineering is able to suck leaves further into the building than town engineering does. They're both pretty bad, but black engineering can usually get their leaves in autumn, pulled up to the second, maybe even the third floor.
That's a good design feature.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Natural flora getting into the building. But the reason that those two particular buildings are so difficult to remodel is that as soon as you touch it with a major renovation, now it has to be brought up to the current energy code, which both buildings are far from it. It has the ADA has to be brought up. In town engineering, we have one handicap bathroom in the entire thing, which is, in my opinion, a crime. But it's allowed to be grandfathered in for that.
But it's legal.
It's legal. It's legal. Okay. What is legal is not necessarily right. What is right isn't always necessarily legal.
Correct.
Oh, I love the attorney said that. That is awesome. Oh, and everyone, Chuck's like, hey, could you edit this video out a little bit? I don't know if I want this on the internet. Okay. But you're right. It is legal to do that. And I've had students that were in a wheelchair that could not go to the bathroom in town engineering. The handicapped bathroom is a fairly recent, within the last couple of years, really, that it was finally had one put in the on the ground floor. But my point is that it is very difficult to open that can of worms and bring a older building up to current codes. So that's the situation for the case here that Chuck and I are talking about. Old building, change the use of it, change the occupancy, broke it up into a bunch of small little pieces, small apartments. Now each apartment needs its own, and where the lawsuit stems from is the HVAC system. So now what? There's some other considerations. That couldn't use natural gas.
They were prevented from
Yep.
designing it with natural gas. They wanted it all electric. There were some budget issues.
Right?
It was, there were two grants that had been given, which limited what could be done architecturally with this building as far as placement of condenser units and anything outside or inside for that matter. The way it appeared was being watched over by the people that had given the grants. And so there was a lot of restrictions on what they could do or not do there.
Well, let's just look from an HVAC standpoint. Sophia and Anna both took my HVAC design class this last semester. So what do? Remove natural gas as an option. Because it's on a town square, ground source heat pump, also not an option. We have to go all electric. Well, that only leaves you with a couple of choices now. We don't have any green space around to put like a large air-cooled chiller or anything. So a lot of the systems that a designer would go to are automatically off the table. What that leaves you with is a couple of options, like those mini split systems that we looked at, one of the very, very basic ones. I didn't even have them do calculations on those. Literally, it's like, hey, here's a mini split, or a variable refrigerant volume is the one that they end up going with because of the limited space to put outdoor heat rejection. There's just not a lot of place that wouldn't drastically alter the looks of the building to put this particular equipment.
It just made for a hard situation.
It did.
To make it work perfect,
Right. And then making it work perfect is where let's talk about how the lawsuits came up. It's like, okay, we designed around a variable refrigerant volume. We've got the ability to change the temperature in each individual apartment building. Everybody has their own controls. Okay, great. Now what? So, Chuck, if you want to go into how the lawsuit actually came up.
Well, the owner in that particular situation had, they felt, tried to fix it, and some of the contractors or subcontractors had thought that they had tried to fix it, and ultimately they came to the point where there was a disagreement about whether or not the system was functioning in the way that it should, which is an important point, I think, for everybody, all of you, to realize is that, what I look at as a lawyer on the side, usually on the side of the contractor, is not, does something work perfectly or not? Does it do everything that the owner wants? You have to look at what's contracted for, because the important thing is you are involved in some stage of construction, and there's a contract that defines what you're going to build or what you're going to produce for an owner. And so you don't look at, is it perfect? Is it do everything that I, the owner, want? Your job is to build what was designed. And some of you are involved in design work, some are not, just in construction.
Well, and here's something that's important, and this is I think this is important in no matter if we're talking about you're an engineer and you're designing cars, and you're an engineer and you're designing buildings, you're an engineer and you're designing bridges. Perfection in engineering is not the standard. Okay, if that's the case, Chuck, I don't know. Would you agree with that? I don't think perfection is the standard for engineering.
It depends on how you define
perfection. Thank you. There's a great lawyer answer. Well, it depends on how you define.
If what you mean is you were talking about the Kansas City Skywalk collapse.
Right.
If perfection means it's going to stand up and last, then yes, that is the requirement. So it depends on what you're talking about. But
then that's the tricky part of
situation. I mean, I can think of other situations and other cases I've been involved in, without certainly not wanting to be specific about any one case or any one situation. But, you know, if you design a building to handle, um, say it was this, I'm making this up as an example, a retail space that you enter into with really nice, fancy sliding doors in the state of Iowa in the winter that's facing to the north. It makes a difference when you're trying to decide how to heat that space, whether there's going to be 5 people coming and going and in there during the day or 300, because that door is opening and closing and opening and closing, you know, over and over.
Well, it's interesting you said that. I just helped a friend with an engineering firm. We just looked at putting a new entrance on a high school in the Des Moines area. And that entire question, this school is moving to metal detectors. So now all couple hundred of them have to go through the same checkpoint. And now, all right, how do we get a couple hundred people through? Not instantly, because everybody has to go through these metal detectors. How do we not freeze and break pipes while this is happening every morning? This is a trick proposed to the engineering group here, and I'm like, I'm feeling some radiant heat here, you know, in the floor, because even if the door's open, that radiant heat doesn't disappear. But if it got to be, say, 50 degrees while this is happening, is that a failure?
Right.
You see, that's where perfection is.
Perfection deals with use and deals with expectations and everything else, you know?
Because I would define perfection as nothing frozen broke. Whereas the school might, after this is going, they're like, hey, our people working in this lobby, they're cold. You know, and I'm like, well, yeah, it's minus 20 degrees outside and the students are propping the door open, you know,
Right.
But nothing frozen broke. So in my mind, that's perfection. In their mind, it might be something entirely different. And I think this goes into the role of the engineer during early discussions with an owner, managing expectations and getting a very, 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 very specific scope of work that they're looking for at the beginning. A lot of times when I get called in to answer this question, so Chuck's like, hey, Brad, we got a lawsuit. Owner says the system isn't working right. The designer says, and the contractor that you're working for says, yeah, it's working fine. What do you think? You're a professional engineer at this. You've done it yourself. Where are we at in that continuum where one side is completely in the right, the other side is completely in the right, and where are we at in between here?
And a lot of times the answer that I get, my conclusion, which includes your opinions or other experts, is what was the use and what was the expectation and what was contracted for. You know, it doesn't, like you said, if we're talking about truck bays on a repair shop, how many trucks are going to come in and out every single day during the winter? And if they're upset because it gets down to 50 degrees in there and they're opening those big doors multiple times during the day, that's something that a design person should know, be able to help figure out, but the design person has to be able to have the accurate numbers from the owner about that. And that's an example of a kind of thing. I mean, cases like that are times when the contractor that's doing the construction gets blamed for something that really isn't their fault. They built it exactly the way it was contracted.
Yeah, and that's something that almost always happens. We hire some experts to come in. The first thing that we do, it's going to be, let me see the contract, let me see the drawings. What was agreed to? Who got paid to do what? Did that happen? And as you know, designers are going to want to say, well, I designed it just fine. It just wasn't built right. Builders are going to say, nope, I built what was on the drawings. It's the designers. Usually, and I'm going to, if you don't mind me generalizing here, and Chuck, maybe you have a different experience, but most of the time, I would say that the really bad lawsuits are never one thing. It's usually a bunch of different things went wrong that create a really bad problem. And now there's probably blame to go around for everybody, which is difficult because then it's like, well, how do we assign percentages of blame and here, jump in there, I guess, if you
Well,
think.
I think you're right. I mean, and I don't know about buildings and problems with buildings that don't become bad. They don't, I don't see those. They don't get to litigation stage usually. Most contractors, most good contractors are willing to work with people and work with an owner and fix the problem. And I think most of the time those problems get taken care of without litigation. By the time they get to me,
Usually, yes.
they usually involve, there's something I don't know, some jobs just go bad.
They do, yeah.
There's a reason
Yeah.
that we call them bad building cases because it's just like some buildings just, things don't go right. And oftentimes it's a combination of small things
Yep.
from many different specialties, and they just happen to all rear their ugly head in one place or one building.
This particular building, one of the things that I think as the expert witness for the contractor, working for Chuck here, Chuck's working for the general contractor. The thing that frustrated me a little bit about this is that, I mean, and not anything in particular for the people I'm working for, but the owner's expectations. Here, let me explain this. So, what was it, 7, 8 years after the building was built? Now they're suing?
It's perfectly legal to do that.
It is. It is.
And
It
they have
is.
the right to do that.
They do. They do.
There's things that my client in that case had wished that they had been kept in the loop more along the way, and they weren't. But, the owner has the right to do that. The
They do.
statute of repose is, 10 years now?
Yes.
And
Oh, here, there. Thank you, Chuck. In your text, statute of repose is one of the testable items. Just saying. Here, and why that's
they're not going to get test over what I say, are they?
No. They're not gonna.
I hope not.
Nothing
also
Chuck
hope
says
not.
is the testable part, but what the book says about it is. And the reason I want to throw that out there is that is a common early question, isn't it?
Yeah.
When did it happen?
Yeah.
How long has it been? Are we within Are we within that statute of limitations and statute of repose? What's the difference between a statute of limitations and a statute of repose? That's rhetorical. Don't answer that. Let them look it up. All right. But this is an important thing. In other words, for those of you doing engineering and construction, something happens today, but maybe you don't hear about it for 7 years.
Right.
And an owner's like, you know what? I kind of got some lingering anger about this particular issue. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's how they feel. And they're like, if I'm going to sue, now's my time. I better get to it.
And they show up at the end a lot of times.
Yes.
Which is a reason why, when you're in the business you all are going to be in, it's important that you keep good records and good notes. I mean,
Please.
you learned
yes.
in college that maybe you learned it in high school. I learned it in college that I really couldn't remember everything the way I thought I could remember it, right? I had to write things down. And it's better evidence if it's something that was written down at the time that it happened. If Sophia says to me, well, 5 years ago, I told Brad blah, 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 and it's helpful for my case, I want to believe that, but it's much more persuasive if she made a note that says on January, whatever today is, 7th, Brad and I talked about blah, blah, blah. And then it's important to keep those notes. And
it's almost as if, Sophia, right? Sophia, Anna, Ben's online here as well. Sophia, so tell me about the standard that I make you do Connie 241 labs to that drives almost everyone taking 241 crazy.
I'm not sure which
Well,
one you're
well,
referring to.
all the labs in general,
Okay.
right? The standard I tell the students for 241 said, here's what I learned from industry working for a company building power plants, is that when I'm doing a calculation, I need to write it down so that years from now, if the company's ever asked on this and I've left and gone to work for someone else, somebody can pull that calculation out, look at it, and understand what it was I did, why I did it, and what the basis of that calculation was, even if I'm not there to explain it.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I've looked through. I mean, our 352 project relied on the 241 calculations and how we did the building, so it was really helpful for my project when we looked back and we could see where everyone got everything, especially when there were walls that didn't line up. We were like, oh, this is why. Yeah, just as you said.
Yeah. And so they just turned in, Anna and Sophia just turned in a final project for Connie 352 where they design an HVAC system.
Okay.
Okay, HVAC and plumbing, well, and electrical, but that's a separate class. But I tell them, I'm like, you're going to turn this in and then you're going to leave. You're not going to be there to answer questions. I'm going to be grading it over the weekend, which I was,
Mm-hmm.
right before Christmas. Terrible time, right? So I wanted to get out of there. All
Was
right.
he generous with his grades?
I would say so for my project at least.
Yeah. Well, I will say that this particular class had a really, really good set of final project grades.
Mm-hmm.
That is not always, yeah, Anna's doing a victory lap. I see her on there. She's excited about that. But the reason they were good is not necessarily that they had right answers. I could have argued with a lot of their numbers. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if this total tonnage for cooling is right or whatever. But what was good is that almost all of them listened when it came to doing the documentation so I could understand it,
Mm-hmm.
I could follow it, and I could see, right, wrong, or indifferent, I could see your numbers.
See their calculations.
Yeah.
Yep.
Towards the end, Anna and I were actually getting made fun of because we had the most pages to print.
Yeah.
But a lot of that was us writing through all of our calculations and making sure that you could see where we got every number. We'd had a lot of Excel sheets that really just showed every single quantity and where we got it, and all of our spec sheets. We had everything laid out just so there was no doubt for you as a grader. We could show you where everything came from and why we got it.
See, and even then, like, let's say that you would have had a wrong number,
Mm-hmm.
wrong difference in temperature from inside to outside, whatever.
Yeah.
Use the wrong factor. If I can find it easily,
Mm-hmm.
that's not really a mistake.
Right.
It's a minor mistake.
I mean, even in that case, then we'll be learning because then we know where the mistake came from, and you can show us, oh, this is the highlighted number where you got it. It was actually supposed to be the number below that. So.
Right. So that's and that is actually one of the reasons why I have them turn in paper copies, and much to the chagrin of most of my students, I'm the old school type that says, all right, you got to turn in paper copies for design notebook. You got to turn in hard copies for final projects. When you do capstone here, several of you will be doing capstone for construction engineering, and for me, I want hard copies. I want to see it. I want to know. I want to be able to go through it and figure out where all these numbers came from. Because, like I said, the process in engineering, I think this carries over to the design world. I was expert witness for a case that literally they found one email from the owner or from the contractor to the owner, showed it to the legal teams, and the legal teams like, okay, lawsuit over, see ya. It was one email, but they were able to find it after the fact. And all I'm saying is, as painful as that documentation is in my classes, if you've got that type of thing and you've got someone like Chuck knocking on your door going, hey, let's do some discovery.
It's a good habit to get into. And I think it's also really good to keep in mind that the documentation and keeping track of those things are really important with decisions that are being made in conjunction with the owner.
Yes.
You know, that's where a one email thing, I mean, I can think of examples if you were just talking about cooling. Well, if you're designing an HVAC system and you say a certain amount of tonnage of cooling will cost you X dollars, and that'll reduce the temperature 25 degrees. Then when the owner calls you and they're unhappy because it's 105 degrees out and it's 80 in their building, you can show them that you did everything they wanted. They didn't want to pay for more tonnage. And those are the kind of things that can get overlooked in documentation. And you'd be surprised how often I talk to people and I say, well, we talked about this and this is what we all decided together. But there's nothing where it's written down by anybody.
Meeting minutes are so important. It's the annoying thing that happens, meeting minutes are critical.
And emails.
Emails are just absolutely critical. And this is how in our industry, and I think I might talk about this a little bit in one of the lecture videos, I can't remember. But the difference between meeting minutes and email and a letter, okay, right? In today's day and age, if an engineer sends someone a letter, right, Chuck, what's that mean as an attorney?
What do you mean?
Well, like if I was to have a concern on a project, and we've been talking about it, and then I put it in a letter and I send it, let's say Sophia's project, building owner, and she's like, well, I want this, and I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea, and we talk back and forth, and she's like, no, I'm pretty certain I want this, and I write in a letter, dear
Right.
Sophia, just to recap our conversation, we mentioned this. I would just like to highlight the disadvantages are this and this and this and this. And just for your consideration, if you want to talk it more, I'd love to talk more with you.
Right.
And I mail it to her.
Yep.
What does that mean?
That means that you've covered yourself really, really well.
And
The most formal and credible way of
Right.
communication.
yes.
I mean, I have legal clients that I do that with, where I have clients where I tell them what I think the situation is and what I think they should do. And if they want to do something different, it's their case. It's not my case.
Right.
It's your owner's building. It's not your building. But you want to be sure that after the fact, they're not going to come back and be upset with you. So you write them the letter that says, I'm recommending this. I understand you want to go a different direction, and that's fine. But I just want to be clear that we talked about it, and my recommendation was to do one thing, and you've chosen something different. And you do that, and that goes a long, long, long way towards solving problems that you would have if somebody came after you for allegedly not doing your job.
All right. So that's something I want all of you, as students, you don't have a lot of context into this. But it's something to bear in mind as you get into professional practice. Asking yourself, especially people with a little more experience, does a letter need to be sent? Or worse, hey, these people sent us a letter. What does that mean? I wonder what that means.
And it doesn't have to be, this confirms that blah, blah, blah. You can write a nice letter.
Oh, yeah.
You can phrase them in terms of thank you for your time and, we discussed this today and presented a couple of options. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a super formal, this is to confirm you ordered me to do whatever.
I would agree. Tact to this business goes such a... what's fascinating to me is that when I was a student, I thought engineering was about math. It's about steel and steam and concrete and stuff we calculate, and we're engineers, right? No, it's actually those are important, but those are way down the list. In our business, especially designing buildings, communication, I've seen more engineers get promoted for good communication skills and more of them demoted because of bad communication skills. If you want to get ahead in the world of engineering, the better your communication skills are, the farther that you will go. I am convinced of that. I don't think anybody will ever convince me otherwise.
If you want to do something other than calculations, there's no question. I mean, we're all salesmen. I'm a lawyer and I'm a salesman.
Yep.
You're an engineer and you're a salesman. Part of what you need to do is make sure the people that you're working for are happy.
Oh, yeah. And especially if you're designing a new building from scratch, you're designing something that has never been done before. All right. Oh, I know. There's tons of apartments, there's tons of offices, there's tons of elementary schools, but you are designing a unique building for a unique owner with unique geography. This is a one-time thing. Buildings are the largest handmade objects in the world, right?
Yes, that's right.
Mostly, I mean, they're mostly handmade. They're mostly handmade. I mean, we do not have a whole. We're not manufacturing plant. You know, Toyota goes and manufactures the exact same RAV, like I just drove here. They manufactured them by the thousands and thousands and thousands. And if we look for all the different years that Toyota has made a RAV4, I mean, we are talking about hundreds of thousands of cars built in a factory under controlled conditions, built with as much automation as possible, probably the same person doing the exact same job, maybe for years. Let's compare that to buildings built by hand in the elements, most of it outside, not a lot of automation. Probably a unique team of people coming together for one single project. I mean, unique designers
Right.
and unique builders. Probably with a unique owner for a unique location. How many contractors might we have on a large project? Dozens?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe hundreds. By the time you include vendors and everything?
I guess I don't know, but
Yeah.
certainly dozens.
So all these people come together for a building once. And then we build it. And, you know, like the Toyota RAV, the beauty about automobile manufacturing is we're going to build some test models and crash them. It's like, oh, that didn't go very well. Well, let's make some changes. I mean, think about how good we could build buildings if we got that luxury in construction.
It's a really good point.
Yeah,
you know?
let's-
I mean, they work the kinks out and then the line runs.
Yeah.
Right? And everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do.
Right.
No big construction project comes off without some things not, nobody can think of everything ahead of time. And there's
Right.
always some things to decide on site or at the last minute or changes that need to be made. And
You know, when,
You know,
when,
that's-
when you put it that, you know, when you think about all these unique people coming together for one unique project, sometimes I'm surprised anything works right at first.
they seem to stand up though.
They do. They seem to stand up. The standing up part is easier, I think. The getting it heated and cooled is far trickier.
That is a common problem, actually. It's a very common problem.
Yeah, right. Anna's laughing at Anna's laughing at me, right? Anna, you know, I'm convincing Anna to go into mechanical design, and she's like, "You are not selling it, Brad. Gotta tell you." You know,
Don't want to be the one to be in trouble.
yeah, she doesn't want to be the one. It's a challenging job, actually. But that's what makes it an interesting profession is that you know there isn't one answer.
Right. You're not going to do this exact same thing over and over and over.
Well, just
While
look at
while we're still talking about this,
Mhm.
we started talking about this when we were talking about communication. So
Yep.
with the unique job, with the unique situation, contractors, all that, that's where you become a salesman and communicator. And you get things worked out with people. And, you know, jobs where the owner and the architect or whoever the owner's representative is, when they like the contractors that are building it, they go smoother and better
oh gosh, yes.
and more profitable, and people are happier at the end. And so some of it is salesmanship.
Hey, here online here, I'm getting a little bit of static in my headset. Hey, Riley, are you muted? I can't tell on this. Is everybody muted online?
Yeah, I'm muted.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right. Anyway, there's just a little bit of static. Maybe it's in the booth, but those guys are gone. They kind of just left us to our own devices. All right. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. I could just barely
They're
hear their
just taking a
voice.
nap.
Yeah, just barely. Well, I don't blame them, you know.
Listen to this.
Yeah. Right. All right.
So
Okay.
while we're talking about documentation, one thing I just thought of is you have to remember when you're documenting what's going on in a job, whether it's the design phase or construction, every email that you write to the person sitting across the hall from you that's part of your business could end up being discoverable in a lawsuit. And it's
And
so-
every text.
Right, your text messages, your emails, and, you know, your first reaction when somebody says you and your company did something wrong is say, well, that's a bunch of BS. us, and oftentimes you vilify the people that are accusing you of doing something wrong, and then you do that on paper, in an email or a text, and it shows up, and it makes you look really bad. So you have to remember, not just in construction, but really in your life.
In your life.
Nothing that's written down is gone forever anymore. And people that are good at doing what I do, you know how to get it, and it makes you look bad. It makes you look bad when you have said things that aren't appropriate.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We talked just slightly last week with Sophia's parents on this idea of digital dirt and how nothing, unlike when I went to college, you could do things and you could do stupid things and they would go away, right? You could learn from them and move on, whereas Sophia's generation cannot, because everything is recorded. Everything is there forever, like you said. So that is absolutely true in the professional world. What Chuck is saying as an attorney, if he's got a client and someone's suing his client, well, Chuck can sit here, turn around and say, all right, I want all of your emails and all of your text messages from this date to this date that discuss building X.
Yep.
And I need them all. And he gets to look through them all. And trust me, he's hoping for something that paints his client in a favorable light and maybe the person suing them in a poor light. They'll find it all. All right? You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to delete these. Yeah, that is the fast way of getting into serious trouble.
Deleting them doesn't get rid of them.
No, somebody's got them. And worse, you delete stuff, someone else doesn't. This comes up in discovery, and maybe that's a good thing to talk about, Chuck. If you could talk about this process of discovery, when something goes bad, what is discovery? What does that even mean? Like I was involved for your discovery process. Why don't you go ahead and?
So if there's a claim made, many construction contracts have what's called an arbitration clause. Arbitration means that you're going to present, everybody's seen trials on TV. None of them are like TV. The lawyers are not like TV lawyers either. The people in the offices aren't like TV office people, I guess. But it is a situation where you present your evidence and the other side gets to cross-examine your witnesses and they get to present their own exhibits. And then a judge or a jury makes a decision on what happened, and who's right and who's wrong under whatever the law would be. Arbitration, the judge and jury is an arbitrator, which is a person that has construction knowledge. Usually they're old lawyers that have done lots of construction litigation over the years, but not necessarily always. And so in construction, you can end up in arbitration, which means a private individual is going to be your judge and jury, or you can end up in litigation with like a civil lawsuit with a jury and or a judge. Then in discovery, what that means is
discovery happens before all of these things. All right.
Before a trial.
Yeah, before arbitration, mediation, and trials here. And also, just note, as a fun note, those are testable. Look it up in the book. All right. But anyway, before all that happens, discovery.
So that is how a dispute gets resolved, ultimately. But what starts it is the person who has the complaint files a petition, it's called, and then the next phase of a lawsuit or an arbitration is discovery. And we have written questions that can be sent out. They're called interrogatories, and if Brad is on one side of a case and I'm on the other side of the case, I can send written questions to Brad and ask him to describe for me the parts of his case that I want to find out more information about. And I can send him what's called a request for production and ask him to send me all of the emails that he and Sophie have been sending back and forth about my client. And the next step then after that would be depositions. So after we exchange documents and answer written questions for both sides, usually there's some depositions. If you're, a person that's building or designing a building and there's full-on litigation, you're going to have your deposition taken.
Ooh, let's talk a little
Almost
bit
for
about
sure.
yeah. So what that means is everybody that gets involved in design and engineering, you all have a very, 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 very strong chance of getting called into depositions. All right, and so let me see here. I've been deposed as expert witness multiple times. One time I got deposed for, let me think here, it was 12 hours
Oh, geez.
by one attorney. See, and what happens is attorneys will use the deposition process to, one, learn as much as possible. I mean, that is the point. So then, let's say, Sophia, let's say that the building you designed in 241 and 352, there was a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Be like, so, Ms. Mordini, please explain to me, how did you come up with this? How did you come up with this? What was your basis of this? Have you done this before? Have you ever had any other problems? Have you ever been sued, Ms. Mordini? And then they're gonna go through and try to find as much information as possible. And, they're like, Ms. Mordini, on August 17th of 2018, you were in a meeting and you said this. Oh my gosh, I did. And they're going to ask hours and hours worth of questions, hoping to get you to contradict yourself or to give them something. You can't win a trial in a deposition, or at least I'm not an attorney, but this is what I've been told by attorneys. They're like, you can't win a trial in a deposition, but you might be able to lose one.
There's no question that you can hurt yourself a lot in a deposition. But, if you've done your homework and, people like to make the deposition and the process, I think, into a bigger deal than it is from the standpoint of you have to do everything perfect. You have to be yourself. You have to know your subject. You have to know your case. You have to know what you did, and you tell the truth. And now you don't make a mistake and lose the case like what Brad's talking about. You could get angry and say something dumb, I mean, most of the dumb things you say when you're mad.
Here, hold on a second. Anna has a question here.
Okay.
She's like, Anna, you want to chime in and ask your question?
Yeah. So with like that example that you were talking about, Brad, like where they pull this thing that you said in a meeting in August of 2018 or whatever.
Yeah.
Would they be able to like say something that is not true, or would they have to have like actual, or like could they try to lead you down a path of like
Try to trick
Oh.
you.
Try to trick you.
Yeah, no, they can, but good lawyers aren't going to do that because it makes them look stupid.
Yeah, but I've
So,
been deposed
if-
by really
Okay.
bad lawyers too.
Well, then the good lawyer should have made, if Sophia's the witness and Brad starts picking on her unreasonably, I would be able to then turn around and ask Sophia more questions to show that Brad is being a schmuck.
Yeah.
And as he loses credibility with a jury or a judge or an arbitrator, everything he says becomes questionable.
So
And so good lawyers really don't do that too much. Now, I push a little bit. If I was deposing Sophia, I want to know, is she prepared? Is she gonna stick to her guns?
Yeah.
I might ask her the same question on different things, several different ways, different times, to see if I get the same answer. I like to ask people some questions on things that I know are true that aren't the very best for their case, and see if they admit it right away. Because if they admit it, I think they're telling me the truth.
oh,
and-
and there is remember what we discussed with the Volkswagen case
Mm-hmm.
about how lying is the absolute worst.
Yeah.
It gets you in trouble.
Lying at a deposition is, remember how I said you can lose a case? Well, that's a fast way. to do
Right.
it. Lying is
can.
a fast way. Because
And once you lie once you're really busted on a lie, then everything you say becomes questionable.
it does.
But, so to answer that question directly, they can mislead you a little bit, or maybe make you think that you have something in your hand that you don't really have. But, if you're prepared and confident and you answer your questions honestly, that should backfire on the attorney doing that, more
Here-
so than being helpful.
Here, let me give an example. One case I was on, it was pretty much shut and dry. I was for the plaintiff, and they had a really strong case. I mean, this wasn't even individual was injured. There was a host of code violations. It was just the only question left was how much are they paying out?
Right.
Okay. So with that in mind, one attorney's, and I think this was a poor strategy, but I think he was also a poor attorney. His strategy was to take people like me, the expert witness for the plaintiff, and just try to discredit them in any way possible. So he started asking me questions on mechanical system design. So, Mr. Perkins, have you ever designed a system like this? Have you ever had this problem? And he's asking me questions for things because you submit your resume and your Vita and
Right.
everything that you've done. And he was going back like 10 years into projects I'd designed a long time ago, and he would just start screaming louder and louder. He'd get louder. He got louder. This is the one that deposed me for 12 hours, is that their case stunk. So if they could just discredit the expert witness, they thought maybe it would look better for them. And I had a solid attorney on my side, and and that's why this is why attorneys matter. I mean, different skill sets. There's a reason you want someone that knows what they're doing and experience. But anyway, so he's yelling at me louder and louder, and I'm like, at first, and this is one of the first depositions I did. I was getting a little ticked. I was like, this guy's a jerk. He's trying to make me responsible for this. And then I had this epiphany. Chuck, you'll appreciate this. And then I thought, wait a minute. I'm getting paid by the hour here. So anytime, and I was getting paid by them, for
And you actually know about this topic than he does, right?
exactly. And I know, and I know, so he was asking me questions on mechanical systems. So you know what I did? Every time he asked me a question, I would roll into an answer that was like half an hour or 45-minute dissertation on mechanical systems. It's like, oh, water-cooled chillers. Well, let me tell you about water-cooled chillers. And we would talk. I would go on and on because once he's asked the question, why, not a yes or no question, but when he asks a question like, well, Mr. Perkins, why this or why that? I'd be like, well, let me tell you. And I would talk slower and longer. Right. And as Sophia can attest to, since she's been in at least 100 hours of my lecture, I can go on for a long time. And so I just started talking longer and longer and giving longer and longer answers. And
send him a bill.
Darn right I did. That's how it got to 12 hours. And he got louder and angrier as this went on. And so day 2, so they couldn't even get it all done on one day of depositions. So day 2, one of the other attorneys, another attorney I know, and you'd know because he does all sorts of stuff with construction engineering. But anyway, he wasn't the bad attorney. He was one of the other parties represented because there were several.
Right.
And he's like, before we get started, attorney, the attorney on my side, he goes, could you direct your witness to not slip into lecture mode? And I was
Get out
like,
of here by lunch.
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, well, don't ask stupid questions and you won't get stupid answers. So. But anyway, the deposition process it's serious. It's serious.
I think it's very, it's nerve-wracking for somebody that hasn't done it.
Yeah.
But, I tell people in you all's shoes, first of all, you know the topic better than anybody. Anybody in the room, meaning the lawyers and the clients, you're the expert. You know the topic better than anybody. So you tell the truth, and you don't let them get you rattled. If you don't get rattled, if somebody asking you questions wants to act bad or be stupid or try to misrepresent things, so be it. Let them. You have the attitude that Brad has, which, well, he's asking the questions, I'll give him an answer and not worry about it. And you do that, you'll be fine.
Yes. Honesty and the truth is always the best defense to anything. It's the best defense to a bad memory, right? As long as you're honest, you don't have to remember how you lied.
That's exactly right.
It is.
And when something's wrong, you admit it.
Yeah. Well, and here this goes to let's jump back slightly on the case that I was working for you on, and the thing that came from that I think was a little frustrating. Well, like I said, not really frustrating, but I sympathized with the defendants in this case. I really did, because from what I could tell, I thought they gave the owner what they asked for. I thought they did a reasonable system that I probably would have designed myself. I thought that the performance for that system was reasonable. It wasn't great, but it was also what they bought. But I also have the ability to understand, all right, I know what they bought. I know there's more expensive systems out there, but I also know all the reasons why they couldn't have been used.
Right.
You know, so that one felt to me like an owner that was kind of just fishing for money a little bit, you know, when they were suing.
They could have been, or, you know, they might have really honestly believed what they were saying. I mean, it's hard to say. We didn't, that was a case that was resolved by settlement
Right.
early on. And so we didn't really conduct a lot of discovery. And, you know, so we never took their deposition. For
Dude, man.
instance.
Oh, yeah, Vinny. Vinny's got a question. Sure, Vinny, you want to chime in here?
Hold on. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Vinny. Yeah, go ahead, bud.
Okay. I didn't have a question. My phone's just being stupid.
Oh, your phone's just being stupid? That's it?
Well,
Yes.
now you have to ask
it
a
is.
question.
Well,
Not
now you
me,
have
my
to ask a
phone.
question. Vinny interrupted us here. Everybody's looking at you on, you know, you're like, hey, Vinny's got a question. Vinny, I know deep in your heart you have some question. I just know it.
He always.
He always has a question.
All right.
Come on, don't let me down
Well,
here.
let me think.
Sophia rolled her eyes when you said you didn't have a question.
There's no proof.
There's no
I don't know. I just
Yeah,
don't-
actually, there is. There's
Look at this little camera here.
Yeah,
It wasn't on me at the time.
That's true. It wasn't on her. There might not be proof. All right. Okay.
Is my
Vin-
camera on?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Vinny. No, I can't see you. Right, but go ahead, bud. Ask away.
Okay. Let me think. I just joined a couple minutes ago because I'm in a different time zone and I forgot that it was different.
Okay.
I'll think of something by the end. How
All
about
right.
that?
All right. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, Anna is over here laughing hysterically. I can see her. All right. Vinny, along with Sophia and Anna, have taken several of my classes, and for Vinny not to have a question is quite shocking, actually. So we're going to give him a chance to fix that before the end of the podcast. I'm sure he'll be back with something. All right. I'm sorry, Chuck. Go ahead before
No,
Vinny's phone.
I don't even know what we were talking about.
Oh well. What we were talking about is how in the case that I worked for you on, I thought the owner had a kind of an unrealistic expectation. I kind of thought that I was on the side, and yes, I'm being hired by the defendant here. All right, just in the interest of full disclosure, yes, I was hired by the defendant. But you know what's awesome about teaching at Iowa State and being expert witness is that in our business, there's a lot of what I would call opinions for hire. People that do engineering expert witness for a living, and they will have an opinion, whatever it is that you pay them to have.
There's no question.
Okay.
That is correct.
Right. And what's beautiful about having a separate job is that if you came to me with a case, right, Chuck, if you came with me a case and you're like, hey, we're going to defend so-and-so, here's some information about it, you know, could you take a look at it? And if I read through the information and I'm like, nah, Chuck, I'm not going to take this. They're guilty as heck. I'm going to root for them to lose money. You know, I don't have to take the case because
Correct.
this is because expert witness is not my primary profession. So I only take cases, and I don't know if we probably didn't even talk about this when you hired me. I only take cases where I'm like, yeah, I'm on their side. It's an ethical thing for me. I don't.
That's good. And,
You know.
you know, people hire, there are experts there's experts everywhere, but, you know, I've run into some alleged construction experts and safety experts.
Yeah, let's
from
use alleged on that
places
one.
like Chicago or, you know, Kansas City or out-of-town people who, the point I'm making is, why do you, if you have a little case in Ames, Iowa, why are you going to Chicago or San Francisco to hire an expert who makes 90% of their living serving as an expert expert
Yep.
witness? I don't.
Well,
I
there's
don't
one
think
reason.
juries give them much credibility myself.
Well, there is one reason. Okay, and I'm just gonna point out, and this is for our construction students especially. It is such a small world in the engineering and construction world
Well, that's true.
of Iowa. Let me just talk to you about how this went, because I think this is an important thing on this particular case. So Chuck comes to me and says, "Hey, I need an expert witness." I'm like, "Chuck," I'm like, "Cutler, I could swear I remember that name." He goes, "Yeah, I had two of my boys took classes from you here." It's like, there we go. So he's like, "All right, I got this case." I'm like, "Okay, who's the defendant?" And you're like, "Okay, it's so and so construction company." And I'm like, "Uh-oh. Well, I don't. Is this a conflict of interest or not? I know those guys. I went to school with one of them. They've got like 5 of my students working there. And by the way, they hire me to teach them playing reading occasionally." He goes, "Nah, you're representing them, so I don't really see that as a problem." I'm like, "Okay." So then we go to the discovery where we go to the site and all the other defendants are there. And I'm like, "Hi. I know all of them." I mean, when I say I know all of them, the designer, one of the guys there, I was in his wedding.
That was a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
I can
right,
imagine.
Yeah. I was in his
Not
wedding.
a problem,
Now,
but it was. We weren't going to have
yeah.
Brad actually be a witness at that point.
You're right. So although he was on the same side really as the general contractor, so I was rooting for both of them, and I'm like, and one of the young engineers he brings, my former TA here at Iowa State. I was like, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" The vendor that sold them the equipment.
And a couple of the kids, I mean, young professionals that were there were telling me to say hello to my kids.
Yeah. They're like, "Oh, hey, tell Scott hi for me." I mean, like everyone there
Yeah,
that
it's
was
a small group.
that had either been a student of mine, I had worked with, worked for, or as in the one case, I was in their wedding. And this is why in class I talk about the role of professional reputation and how it is the most precious commodity that you have. I do mean that not just for the construction students though, for any of you that are engineers and wanting to be an engineer, your professional reputation is probably the most precious thing that you have as an engineer. Guard it carefully.
I agree. It also makes your life as you mature in your profession more pleasant. It makes it less stressful. People that are engineers, if you're a structural engineer, you know which structural engineers are good and who you can rely on and who you can't. If you're a lawyer, you know which lawyers you can rely on. If you're a mechanical engineer, you know which ones put out bad stuff. And it just makes you do a better job. It'll be easier for you. It makes it less stressful, and it makes you more successful to guard your relationship always,
I bet you if I was to write
your reputation.
Yeah,
not
if
your
I was to
relationship.
if I was to write down some attorneys' names from Central Iowa area, I could write down on a piece of paper some attorney names, show them to Chuck, and just by his face when I show you the name, you could tell if that is a decent attorney or not.
Well, you can tell different things about different people that you've worked with over the years, And anyway, your reputation is important, and I always tell young lawyers, maintaining your reputation, always being honest about things, those things will come back to help you. Maybe not in measurable dollars and cents, but they will come back to help you as you go through your career.
Or hurt you.
Or hurt you.
The client you didn't get, right? The big case that they picked someone else for. And in construction and engineering, it'd be the big project that went to someone else just because of personal professional relationships. This is such a big thing. I mean, I can think of actually when we've interviewed for another instructor here at Iowa State, if I'm on the committee for it, be like, oh yeah, I took this class with them, X number of years ago. Yeah, we should look at them. Or, oh no, I was in a group with them, and let's not. I mean, all of you, especially, we do so much. We do so many group projects in construction engineering. Other than this class, it's almost all group projects. So you know who you want to work with and who you don't. Even if you haven't worked with them, you've heard your friends talk about them. It's too small of a world. Guard that professional reputation just super carefully.
For sure.
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yeah, sure. Okay, now Vinny's got a question. Hey, Vinny, what's up?
All right. Have you ever seen somebody ruin their reputation and get it back? Like redeem themselves?
Let me think.
I guess as I'm thinking about it, I have had times with particular lawyers where I might question whether they're a person that should have a good reputation. And then later I find out that they're okay and they're fine. Talking about losing your reputation, that's kind of a broad
Yeah, I'm trying to.
categorization to me. I really doubt if somebody gets known as a dishonest business person because of the way they've acted for 20 years, if they ever get that back.
No, I'm going to say no. Yeah, with Chuck, with your description as the context there, I'm going to say no. I can't think of anybody that I thought of that made truly, we're talking dishonesty or poor ethics or something along those lines. I can't think of anybody that I would say had a poor reputation and then was able to change that.
I feel like once you lose it and then they prove themselves worthy later on, every one of those instances is going to be lucky. Oh.
Yeah, it's the exception.
Yeah.
It's the exception. You're
but
like,
then you're still always going to have that distrust a little bit.
Yeah.
There's always be a question mark, right?
Yeah, there always will. There always will. I know. Well, here, let me just use an example of this class, Connie 380. I've had, and not just this class, but other classes. I've had students that cheat, and it's obvious. All right, and never. You're not coming back from that, in the eyes of an instructor. Okay, you're not, and it's just a done deal on the relationship, Gosh, I just absolutely hate dealing with academic dishonesty with a passion. It's a real thing, doesn't happen a whole lot in construction engineering. I think I'm not saying it doesn't at all, but it's a little bit more rare because of the nature of the work, and it's so group work focused, and it's unique buildings and like my 352.
Well, the people that are in this want to do it.
Yes, that's
They're not
exactly
just here
it.
to pass the time.
You're not
going to pick this degree if you're just here to pass time.
If you're just here, yeah. Well, no, I could think of a couple that are. I could absolutely think of a couple that are, but by and large, you're right. The good ones, all right. Now here, by good, later, I don't necessarily mean good GPA. Good GPA has nothing to do with what's a good student and what's a bad student. Personal opinion. I don't care what your GPA is, as long as you're passing, right? But by the good ones, I mean the ones that are active, the ones that are involved, the ones that are doing something more than that minimum to get by. And maybe their GPA is only a 2.01, but they're not but they're busting their butt trying to get through. Those are the ones that you're like, in industry, you're going to do well. You're going to do well. And it's the ones that are like, oh, what's the minimum I got to have to get through, fill in the blanks. Those are the ones that will not. They just won't. So I guess, Vinny, to your question, it's like, can you come back from that? I'm going to say it's possible, but I can't give you a single example where it's happened.
So you should probably just work in a different industry after.
Here, let me give you an example from one of my classes, and I'm doing this because I know Sophia and Anna, and maybe Vinny, you heard this story as well, because I use it as an example for why you shouldn't cheat in my classes. But since a lot of the students in this class have not had me as an instructor before, I think it bears telling again. So I had a student in 352, Connie 352. We have a group project, the one that Sophia was talking about with all the calculations
Right.
and stuff. And I literally say at the start of the semester, I know friends of yours have other projects. Do not copy off of them. Don't do it. You need to learn this. There's a whole bunch of reasons why, but I'm just telling you, don't. And I even tell them, if you cheated in statics or physics or calculus, I don't care. It's not my business. All right? But in my class, I care. And in your Con E classes, I care. Don't do it. So anyway, one student has a copy that he copied from someone else's hard drive unknowingly. Okay? He's using it as a step-by-step guide for his 352 final project. And his teammate tells me, he's like, hey, I think they've got a final project from somebody else. I don't know for certain. I just want to tell you I think this is the case, and it's not me. I'm like, okay, thank you for the heads up. I appreciate that. Call the student in, ask him like, hey, do you have a final project from somebody else? He says, no, I don't. Okay, I take him at their word. I tend to take students at their word until I'm given absolute proof otherwise. So say, hey, all right, have a nice day. Well, he's in the Hewitt lab in town engineering. And for those of you that, like any lab, there's rows of computers where people are sitting behind other people. And sure enough, he's got someone else's final project up while he's doing it. And the thing is, he's sitting in front of my TA for Connie 241. And she comes to me.
So she could see it.
Oh, she can see it. And she knows what he's doing because she's taken both taken this class. She goes, all right, so-and-so has it. I saw it. It's not even, he's just out in the open there in the lab. I'm like, oh, gosh. All right, fine. So I call him in. I'm like, okay, so here, I hear you're copying. And I'm like, tell me the truth now so that we don't have to go to Dean of Students and academic dishonesty and the whole thing, because I hate that paperwork with a passion. Hate it. Anyway, he comes clean. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I was just using it as a guideline, on and on. And I'm like, okay, here's the deal. I'm going to go over your final project with a fine-tooth comb. And if you so much as copy 2 words or 2 calculations, because I have all the old copies, all right? I can go down, and once I found out whose project he was copying, I've got the hard copy.
You can compare it.
Yeah, I can compare it. I'm like, don't do it. All right? So anyway, I chew him out, and I tell him, we need to end this here so we don't have to go to, all right, okay, fine. He's back down in the Hewitt lab. And then he starts complaining to someone else in Connie about how unreasonable I was and how everybody does it and on and on and on and why I'm just overreacting and on. And our department chair hears about it. So now what do I got to do? He's like, hey, yeah, right, so-and-so told me. And I'm like, he's like, you got to take him to Dean of Students now. All right, fine. So I called him in and I said, hey, so I hear you're not happy with the deal we worked out. He goes, well, I've accepted it, but, I'm like, no, you haven't. You're complaining so loudly, everybody in Hewitt heard you.
Everybody heard.
And the department chair heard. So now, guess what? We're going to Dean of Students. I'm writing him a letter. I thought he was going to pee in the chair he was sitting in. He freaked out. I was like, and the stupid part of all this? He was a mechanical emphasis. This has been several years. So anyone watching this, you do not know who this is. All right? This has been years. Anyway, so now everybody in Connie knows. Okay. Well, guess what? He's trying to interview with contractors who all know now. Our department, this might have been about the time one of your boys graduated. Right? It was not one of his sons.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it was not. It was not. But anyway, it might have been about the time one of them graduated. Anyway, everybody, all the Connies talk. They talk to all the people that just graduated. Long story short, he can't get a job for any contractor in the state of Iowa.
Because of what he did.
Because everybody's like laughing at him and they're like, oh my God, what an idiot. Look at this, and I mean, literally, he can't get a job anywhere. He ends up working at Culver's after graduation, during a time when everybody has multiple job offers in Connie, he's working at Culver's.
Wow.
He had to get a job like on the East Coast eventually, I think. I'm not even sure if he's in construction anymore.
He's gone from here, though.
Oh, he's not in the Midwest. He had to go past, it was just not a good deal.
Turned out
I'm just
bad
saying.
for him.
What's that?
Turned out bad for him.
It did. And that's there is so much communication in our world in construction and engineering. Everybody knows everybody, and once that reputation, right? Kind of go back with what Vinny was asking. This poor kid didn't even make it out of college, and he tarnished his reputation so bad he couldn't get a job in the Midwest. On a 352 project, which is the dumb part. If he would have got a D, who would have known? No one. No one would have known, and no one would have cared. Right. If he would have just if he was so worried about a grade that he's like, oh, I'm gonna cheat to get ahead. But what happened was it affected him way beyond that class. And for no reason. That's the sad part.
It wasn't necessary.
Yeah, it's and the lesson here is that however anything from bid shopping to like Volkswagen cutting corners to whatever it is, you may think you're getting ahead in the short term, but I just assure you that you're not.
Got to put the work in.
You do. There's no shortcut to that. There's not. And maybe in a day and age where we can use AI to solve our statics problems and Chegg has all the answers for all the exams, maybe that's an antiquated idea. But I will say that's why on my other classes that aren't done in 3 weeks, like this one, this Connie 380 is the only one I teach that has multiple choice exams.
Huh.
I hate multiple choice exams. They're not really a good test of anybody's knowledge, but anyway. All right.
So we got any more?
Oh, let's see here. Do you have any thoughts? You're the one with all the cases. You got a case or good examples of professional practice? I mean, we got a few minutes here before they kick us out. Chuck, we got, right? And for all of you watching this, right, we got this attorney, I'm sure Chuck bills out at about $1,000 an hour. So
I wish.
right. So we got him hostage here.
How much should I bill Brad for?
Oh, well, whoa.
About $1,000. He just
Whoa,
gave you a
whoa,
think I should aim up for
whoa,
$1,000
billing.
He would have said that number if he didn't think you were worth it.
Right. Well, Chuck, you never sent me a fee proposal, so it's not in writing, so there's no agreement here.
I can still ask.
And I can say no. All right. So I was just thinking, for all of you watching, we got this attorney here. You should think about a question. In the meantime, I'm going to let Chuck hit us with some wisdom here.
Overall wisdom?
Yeah. Anything that has
Yeah.
to do with construction engineering, ethics, legal stuff, good things here. And I teach the class from the perspective of what do I wish I would have known when I was a young engineer leaving Iowa State, So if there's things that you think would be good to tell someone that's in their early 20s, that'd be good to know on the legal scheme of things.
Well, I think one thing is don't think that you have all the answers just because you're a recent college graduate and you have all the newest theories and you've been taught all this stuff by people like Brad who know more than the average person out there doing that kind of work. I mean, he keeps up with all the modern trends and what's changing and the studies and everything. But there's still a lot to just old-fashioned experience. And you want to rely on people in your business where you're working. Different businesses work differently. But finding a good mentor is a huge help to you if you have that opportunity in the business where you end up working.
Well, I would wholeheartedly second that thought because I had both. I had good mentors and bad ones. You can learn a lot from both, by the way.
You can.
Right? It's just more painful with a bad mentor.
Teaches you how to get out of problems.
Oh, it does. Yeah, yeah.
But a good mentor would be
A good mentor would be
some overall advice for somebody young that's getting started. I think also being honest, if you do mess something up, you just admit it and fix it. The good thing about what you're doing is you are building things that almost always can be fixed,
Oh,
And
there's
so
there's
the-
something I love about our profession in construction and construction and engineering. Why I like being an engineer and I could never be a doctor. There is always a right answer in engineering. Always.
and you
There
can
is.
eventually get there,
Yes.
and
Uh,
you can fix it usually.
Now,
Now-
there may not be a cheap answer,
Right.
right?
Exactly what I was going to say. Money can fix any mistake you make just about. Now, if you put the wrong foundation under a skyscraper, you got a pretty big problem, right?
We have a case
But-
study on that in 241. But anyway, go ahead.
But most of the problems aren't that big and that expensive. And so if something isn't right, you admit it and be honest with everybody involved and get it fixed and move on. We have a tendency never to want to admit that we missed something or did something wrong. And by trying to hide it, you might get away with it a few times, but overall, I think that's not a good strategy. I think the notes and the not writing bad things is a good thing. I have told my own kids about that many times and about how to use emails effectively. In other words, documenting what's happening. Sometimes disputes happen, not because somebody's right or wrong, but just because people have different memories about what happened and what was decided at some point in time. And, that's happened to everybody. It hasn't happened to everybody in the context of building a building, but that's happened to everybody, where you leave a conversation with a different opinion about what was decided or what the plan is from the same two people, different impressions, same conversation. And that's why when you're building things and you're building things for a profit to make money, you don't want to have to redo them. So documenting important steps and important decisions, doing it nicely, doing it professionally, will serve you well over the course of time. I can think of and examples in my own practice where I believe somebody when they tell me, well, I talked with Sophie and she and I decided X,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't remember it that way 2 years later. And so I really think that would be something that looking at my own boys and the way they documented things when they started versus the way they document them now, they're old enough that they've run into some problems in their practice, in their business, and that they've seen things not work out exactly the way they wanted sometimes. And, they've learned from their own experience and from me harping on them about keeping track of things. So I think that would be a good
Those are good
piece of
takeaways for sure.
advice.
Yeah, I know that. Something I took away from Jenny's class was she told us about a time she had someone she was working with said they ordered like a different amount or type of fire system, and she knew that she wrote on a sticky note somewhere that this is what they told her to do. This is what they told her, how they told her to do it. But she couldn't find the sticky note, and then from then on, she recorded a phone book for every single call that she has, and she passed it around the room. So that was something that I remember still, is just seeing how detailed every conversation was, and she records every single call that she takes. So
And I don't record every single phone call that I take. If I was coordinating, I coordinated with Brad, but if this was a building and the three of us were coordinating about getting together and what our topics were going to be and the time and all that, I just keep track of the communications that are substantive. I don't keep track of every single piece of paper, every single email.
Yeah, it gets easier as you go to know where that dividing line is.
I think so.
What's important, what's not, what's something I need to record, or just versus just things that aren't germane.
Right. I
Right.
agree.
All right. Well, hey, out there in Zoom land that are watching, does anybody have any questions? Anna, you have been shockingly quiet for you in a class. I'm going to pick on you since
You said I had to be on mute while you guys were talking. You said I had to be muted.
Well, no, I know, but you haven't asked any questions. That's why I'm saying is you've been shockingly quiet. You haven't hardly asked anything. Come on now.
Okay, I've got one. So Chuck, I know you were talking about some of the projects that you do and that you've worked with Brad for, and they all seem to be like post-construction, like people finding issues in the system or in the building in general, like after the building is already completed. Have you ever done any projects or done any representation like before a project is done? Like working for an owner or something to like do like risk management type of things for a project?
I have not done work just in general as a risk manager. I have gotten involved in projects before they're completed when a big disagreement happens while it's underway. You know, if you take a
Okay.
remodeling of I'm trying to be careful about what I talk about because of, I don't want to talk about anybody's case particularly, but like completely redoing a parking ramp. And there's a question about whether or not the existing structure will support the new deck that's going to be put on. And so, for various reasons, a dispute develops about the way the decking is being removed, and is that damaging the supporting structures, and will they be sufficient for the future once the decking's redone? Did that make sense? My description of what the problem was?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, that was an actual
It's
case.
it's not something that can be delayed. In other words, you can't just wait and say, let's see how it goes.
Right.
Okay.
And you should get that decided earlier than later. You don't want to wait and see how it works out and then fight about it later. Like I said, the footing size, given the soils, given the conditions, given the kind of building you're building, is the footing the right size or not? You should get that. You should not build the building on top of it if that's still a question. And if you have to get to the point of getting the lawyers involved, you should do it at the early stages rather than waiting and seeing if it works out. You don't have to rebuild the whole dang building, right?
That's actually good advice to begin with. Problems, if you know you have a problem, let's just wait and see if it goes away is probably not the best answer.
Right. Covering it up with sheetrock and hoping nobody discovers it, that's not the way to do it.
It's not. All right, Anna, did that answer your question? Are you good there? Or you got more?
No, that was good. I was just wondering if we were, or if he's ever done anything like pre-construction, but
It's not very often, but it has happened. And I tried to give you an example of when I've had that happen. And then,
Yeah.
you know, it's obvious. If you can't agree on what kind of footings are going to hold up your building, you've got to get that resolved.
yeah.
All right. Anyone else out there? Because otherwise, I think we're probably gonna come to a conclusion here.
Do either of you guys know much about the Oskaloosa pool deal? Or have you guys heard anything about that or no?
Oh, Chuck must have. He's laughing.
I don't know enough to and shouldn't talk about it.
Oskaloosa pool. What? I know. I've not heard about
I guess
this.
from the very brief rundown of what I've heard of it, they're building like, I don't know if it's like a YMCA type facility in Oskaloosa.
Okay.
The contractor by the name of Graphite took it on. It got like, I don't even know, halfway done. So like the structure's up, I think. That's like about it. And then they kind of pulled out of it for a variety of different reasons, depending who you talk to, what stories you hear. It ranges from all sorts of different things. I was just curious if anybody could shed any light on that situation, but if you can't talk about it, I understand.
Well, I can't shed any light on that particular situation, but I can shed light on the fact that pool construction in general can be difficult and can be tricky. And especially around here, you got to deal with the weather. You got to deal with, 4 foot of frozen ground in northern Iowa. Or you plan for it anyway. I think it's 4 foot still, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
you got all kinds of mechanical systems. You have special rules that apply to swimming pools as far as electricity and grounding the pool in a way that it won't be, that people won't get shocked or electrocuted if something goes haywire. And so pools can be a tough one in general.
And it can be a very tough one to find someone to design it. I've done one, and the only reason I did that one is actually this is so one of my boys was in a wheelchair for a year, and then we bought one of those endless pools,
Mm-hmm.
big spa thing. I found a used one in Ankeny. All I need to do is have somebody move it to my house. Well, just so happened at the same time I needed this done, one of the local pool companies said, "Hey, we need to design this pool. I know what to do, but we need to have a engineer stamp it and design it and stamp
Right.
it." And I'm like, "I can do that if you can move this." And you gotta understand, this wasn't like a little spa. It was like a 20-foot long, pool. And I said, "I could do it. I'll be your employee. You carry all the liability insurance and everything. I'll design it and stamp it." Well, I said, "I can do that, but you got to move this to my house." And he's like, "Oh, we are just so busy. We could probably get to it after summer." And I'm like, "Yeah, that time frame doesn't work for me. My son needs this therapy now." So I probably couldn't start on designing your pool until after that was moved. Got moved the next weekend, and I designed a pool. But it took a lot of learning, actually.
That can be very problematic. There's special.
I mean, fortunately, I understood all the pumps and pipe sizing and that whole thing. But I had to delve into some code issues that I had never had to before. So they were kind of in a hurt because they couldn't find most engineers.
Do it.
Yeah, so most engineers would be like, no,
Did you have
thanks.
separate electrical?
Yeah, I didn't do anything electrical. Right, I
all
wouldn't.
the
I would.
bonding and all that?
No. I don't touch electrical. Right, but yeah, I could see where that's the trick. No, I have not heard of this pool case.
I think that there's some pools in Iowa where there are disputes going on right now.
Okay. All right, Ben. Did you have any other crazy pending litigation ones that you've heard about that we can't talk about?
No, I think that's the only interesting one I got for today.
All right then. Well, hey, just a reminder: if anybody wants to do a case study, we're going to be doing that this next Thursday. So please let me know if you're interested. Love to have you here in studio, but we can also do it by Zoom. All right, everyone. Thank you, as always, for attending, and I hope you learned a few things from this. Chuck, I want to thank Chuck for coming. Thanks, Sophia, for driving all the way up here as well. I sure appreciate both of you being here in person. All right.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks. All right. Catch you another day.
Thank you.